Welcome to this Zenworks video demonstration. In this video, we will demonstrate how to use the Protecting Against Malware Getting Started page to configure the required settings for monitoring malware threats in the management zone, and to use the anti-malware dashlets in the monitoring process. The components for monitoring malware threats in Zenworks include an anti-malware database, a Linux primary server with Kafka enabled to sync the anti-malware database with the Zenworks database, and the anti-malware dashlets and an anti-malware page to display the data. We'll get started by navigating to the Protecting Against Malware Getting Started page in the Zenworks Control Center. The components and configurations we'll be demonstrating are found in the Monitor Malware Threats section of the Getting Started page. A Linux primary server is required for the Kafka platform to sync the anti-malware database with the Zenworks database to monitor anti-malware implementation and status. You can also use the Zenworks virtual appliance for this server. If possible, this server should not be used for additional tasks such as subscriptions, services, database maintenance tasks, or inventory tasks. The configuration for the anti-malware database is disabled until we have Kafka enabled on the Linux primary server. For the purposes of this demonstration, we already have a Linux primary server installed, which is why the Enable Kafka link is active under Linux primary server. If we didn't have a Linux primary server installed, the Add link would be active. If you need to add a Linux primary server in your environment, clicking the Add link leads to information for adding one. We'll now click the Enable Kafka link to select our pre-existing Linux primary server. We can monitor the status of the action with the text next to Status. We can also use the Check Status of Services link under Anti-Malware Database to go directly to the Zenworks diagnostic page, where we can see the status for each component of the Kafka service in the Kafka cluster panel. After giving it a couple more minutes, we now have all the components running. Once the Kafka service is running, we're ready to configure the anti-malware database. So back at the Getting Started page for Protecting Against Malware, we click the Configure Database link under Anti-Malware Database, which is now enabled. The anti-malware database and the Zenworks database have to be of the same type in order to sync. When we access these settings, Zenworks automatically determines the type of Zenworks database that is installed on the Zenworks primary server and provides a configuration of the same type for the anti-malware database, either PostgreSQL, embedded or remote, Microsoft SQL Server, or Oracle database. Our primary Zenworks server has embedded PostgreSQL, so we'll leave this option selected, but we could also choose Remote PostgreSQL here. With embedded PostgreSQL, one more advance in the wizard brings us to the final step for configuring the database. If we had one of the other database types, there would be several more configuration steps, such as providing a server address, authentication, and so forth. Detailed information about these settings is included in the help for the wizard and can also be accessed in the Endpoint Security Anti-Malware reference on the Zenworks documentation site. Once we get a completed status for configuring the anti-malware database, the Populate Database link is now active, so we'll click this link. In this demonstration, we only have one primary server set up, so the dialog box that opens to execute this task informs us that these services will have to stop and restart. This task prohibits any other action in the Zenworks Control Center until it's complete. If we had multiple primary servers, the dialog box would have instructions for doing this task ourselves to ensure all primary servers are down during the database migration. After the migration, or populating the database is complete, we'll need to log back into Zenworks Control Center. Our Populate Database option now has a status of completed. If we check the status of services one more time, we can see that everything is running and the anti-malware database is included in the database list. With the anti-malware database configured and the sync enabled for the Kafka service, data from anti-malware related events can start displaying in the anti-malware dashlets, so long as we already have the anti-malware enforcement policy deployed to devices in the zone. After giving time for some anti-malware related events to take place, we'll now click the View Dashlets link from the Getting Started page to go to the Security dashboard where the anti-malware dashlets are displayed by default. We'll start by looking at the Device Malware Status dashlet from the expanded view. This dashlet displays the malware status for individual devices in the zone for a selected detection period. We can see in the graph the percentage of devices that have no threats, resolved malware threats, and devices with unresolved malware threats. This data corresponds to threat data for the last 24 hours, which is the default setting. We can change the detection period and also apply other filter options to display a more finite set of data as needed. The same devices represented in the graph are also listed in the grid at the bottom, which enables us to execute these actions here on selected devices. If we click a resolved link in the grid, we're taken to the anti-malware page for that device. This page contains all the anti-malware related information specific to the device, to include version status for the anti-malware agent and malware signature, scan information, specific malware threats, and files associated with those threats. If we click a link for a specific malware threat, we're taken to the Malware Threats page, which shows specific information about the threat and all the devices impacted by it. We'll next look at the Device Last Malware Scan dashlet. This dashlet gives you a snapshot of the latest scans that have run on all devices with the anti-malware agent installed. The graph defaults to show the percentages of devices that have had scans run in the last 24 hours, last 7 days, last 30 days, and scans run more than 30 days ago. We can modify these time periods in the graph filter, as well as filter the graph by scan type, by a specific network, and by device folders, groups, types, and operating systems. The table in this dashlet also lists all applicable devices. We can filter the table as well to customize the data that displays in the grid, perform certain actions, or search for a specific device. If we click a device link, it will bring us to the device's summary page, the same as in other anti-malware dashlets. The Top Malware Threats dashlet displays the list of top malware threats in the zone. By default, the top malware threats are displayed based on the number of infected devices. You can modify the filters to display the top malware threats based on the most number of devices with unresolved threats or the most recently detected malware threats. You can also filter the data based on a particular threat type. The threat types include adware, application, archive bomb, dialer, rootkit, spyware, and virus. This dashlet can be customized to best fit your needs. You can also create multiple custom dashlets if required. For example, you can create a dashlet for the Windows 10 devices in the zone with the most number of threats, or you can create a dashlet to identify the top virus threat based on the number of devices impacted by it. The table in this dashlet lists the threats that are represented in the graph. By clicking a threat link, we can view a page that contains all the information specific to that threat, to include infected devices and a robust filter to only display the data we need. The last dashlet we'll look at is the Device Malware Signature version. The purpose of this dashlet is to assess which devices have the latest malware signature version downloaded to those devices, and the latest anti-malware agent updates installed. Here, we can filter by specific versions of these downloads to see the specific numbers of devices that have those versions. The filter also includes many of the same filter options we've shown in the other dashlets. Again, the table is provided for viewing devices individually or for looking for a specific device. These options enable us to kick off a scan or request malware signature or anti-malware agent updates on selected devices. In this video, we've demonstrated how to configure the anti-malware database and the settings required to synchronize Zenworks data with anti-malware data in order to monitor malware threats. We've also viewed the monitoring capabilities of the anti-malware dashlets and device anti-malware page, which enable awareness of current threats and the Zenworks security options to counter those threats with vigilant scanning, malware signature updates, and anti-malware agent updates. For more information about using Zenworks security products, view other Getting Started videos or see the Zenworks documentation page. Thanks for watching.